This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Again, today's topic is of vital importance. It's of vital importance because, as I've said repeatedly in the last month or so, we are indeed in the greatest battle for the hearts and souls of mankind in the history of the world. That is not even the slightest exaggeration. That is exactly where we are in America, in many of the European Union nations, Australia, New Zealand, and nations on different continents. We are all in the same trajectory, but America, our trajectory is going the fastest, and the potential for destruction is catastrophic. Why? Because America was founded as a Christian nation by the Pilgrims and Puritans. When they came here, they actually dedicated, they got down in prayer and they supernaturally dedicated the land of America to the biblical God, and they entered into a holy covenant or a holy contract with the biblical God based on the contract that God, or the covenant that God made with ancient Israel. Now, there are countless passages in the Old Testament, primarily, which illustrate the nature of this covenant. Perhaps the shortest and the most concise and the most to the point, if you will, would be in Deuteronomy 28, which is often called the blessings and the curses. Now, in Deuteronomy 28, and this is how the Pilgrims and Puritans entered into a supernatural covenant with God. And let me add that the Pilgrims and Puritans, if you were to compare the biblical educational level, the proper understanding of the Old Testament and the New Testament, the ability to read or write Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and so on and so forth, and the ability at a very young age to understand physics, advanced mathematics, history, philosophy. I hate to break it to a lot of people. I'm not talking about you, the listeners of the Paul McGuire Report audience. You know that. I'm not talking to you because you're hungry for truth. There's no question in my mind that you are hungry for truth. You're hungry for reality. You're hungry for God's will. You're hungry for God. You know why I know that? Well, I read your letters, your emails. I talk to you by phone. I speak to you at the Paradise Mountain Church meetings. I speak to you at conferences. And that's one big way. Well, actually, that's a very encouraging way. But the reason I know, without a shadow of a doubt, that you, the listener of the Paul McGuire Report radio program, loves God and knows what I'm talking about, is tracking with me, is because I know that if you did not love God and you weren't tracking with me, you would tune me out. You would have left me a long time ago. You'd go listen to some Christian sedative preaching that puts you to sleep, or some, lying nonsense or false teaching or trivial pursuits in the name of evangelism. No, you come back over and over again to listen to this program, not because I'm so great. The reality is, the main reason you come back listening to this program over and over again, and by the way, our numbers are skyrocketing. Now, of course, you would never know it, because they have rigged the internet now so ruthlessly. It's like, if you spend any time at all on the internet, like I do, researching, or there's people I listen to on the internet, just like you do. Probably we have some of the same favorite people, but I have watched their numbers artificially decline. And the reason that the big tech companies did this in the first place, and then they buried them at the bottom of the search engines, they did this for two reasons. Number one is they wanted to cut off the advertising dollars that all of these radio programs and ministries, etc., that speak the truth, were getting phenomenal numbers of viewers and watchers and listeners because people are hungry for the truth. So the numbers they had were so large that you could name dozens and dozens of alternative media, whether it's blog sites, websites, articles, whether it's radio programs, podcasting, television, or whatever. And the sheer volume of numbers for alternative media, which was speaking the truth, for the most part, the numbers in the alternative media exceeded, and often vastly exceeded, the numbers that the so-called mainstream media would generate with their websites, with their podcasts, with their television, with their articles. In fact, the mainstream media was clobbering to death. The alternative media was clobbering to death the mainstream media. Now, there are exceptions. There are those mainstream media shows that let's remember something. We're not dealing with an equal playing field. So whether we're dealing with a psychopath, I'm trying to be polite, but at the same time, I want to be very direct. Let's just call it a psychopathic television cable news network like MSNBC. It's one program after another with the target demographic of psychopaths. But they still have a massive budget. And you can go down the list of the psychopathic the psychopathic mainstream media cable news networks. Massive budgets, deep pockets. They're never worried about going belly up. They can do everything that they want and drive away as much of the audience that they choose to by insulting at least half their audience. Because if they're going to insult conservatives and deplorables and President Trump, they're going to lose half their audience. But they do it anyway. So what does that tell you? The light bulb should go on in your head. It should tell you that our media, this is very revealing. You won't learn this in communications classes and media classes in colleges and universities. Whether you're going to secular ones or Christian ones, you won't learn this truth because it's above the IQ level of the professors. You see, once upon a time in America, the media, newspapers, radio, television, film, whatever, once upon a time in America, and it wasn't all that long ago, it was when I was a young man, and many of you were young men and young women, the media, for the most part, was a business. It was called the entertainment business, or the media business, or the television business, or the radio business, or the newspaper business. But whatever media you were talking about, the word business was always used in the name of the media you were talking about. It was a business. And like all businesses, it's based on profit and loss. And in the radio and TV business, it's pretty simple. The success of your program in mainstream media is usually attributed to how many listeners or viewers you have. And the more listeners and viewers that you have, the more potential buyers you have for the products that are advertised on those mainstream media, radio, television programs. So that's the business model. If you have a successful program, you have a large audience. And when you have a large audience, you can charge a big amount for a 30-second or a 60-second or occasionally a 90-second commercial. You can charge big bucks for your commercials because you got a lot of people listening, and that business corporation that wants to sell its products, whether it's life insurance or cars or health plans or forgive me for being vulgar, but I'm going to say it anyway because every time I turn on Fox News and the radio, it's either a ad for depression, an ad for anxiety, but more than all that, it's ads, endless ads for erectile dysfunction. Sorry, I wasn't trying to be vulgar, but I can only take so many commercials on erectile dysfunction per day, okay? Because really, I don't want to know about it. I mean, I'm compassionate. I guess I'm compassionate. It depends whether the guy is faithfully married. I'm compassionate if that's the problem. But I really don't want to hear the details all day long. I really don't. So the more people you have out there, the higher the dollar amount you can charge for your television or radio commercials. Now, the way this equation works, and it's not a perfect equation, the more people listening or watching, then the more people will buy your product, whatever it is. Well, I'm going to pause on this tangent on that theory because that theory is flawed. I worked with a radio network that was independently owned, the Crawford Broadcasting Network. And if you're listening, please tell Don Crawford that Paul McGuire said hello and that I spoke well of him because I have tremendous respect for him. I want nothing from him, but I have tremendous respect for him because the man was a genius. He was disciplined, and he just didn't follow along with the crowd. And the way he would measure a successful audience was not just in terms of new numbers, and that's what made him a genius. To him, he had a more precise analysis of the audience, and he would have preferred to numerically have had a slightly smaller or somewhat smaller audience. But he said the right audience is not just the biggest audience. The right audience is the audience that's going to purchase and pay for and buy the products and services that support the radio programs. And of course, he was right. He's a genius. He's way ahead of the rest of the people in the radio business. Okay, but still, it's a business model. Now, you and I all know something about business because every single one of us have worked in numerous positions and capacities in the business world. Okay? Every one of us have. Even if that's not our full-time area right now, because America is a capitalist nation and runs on businesses and small businesses, most of us have had a series of jobs, part-time, full-time. Most of us know people who have jobs, and most of us know people who feel the heat. Because you see, when you're in a business that either lives or dies by its profitability, it makes things very simple. You either produce a product or a service or a television program or a radio program that people enjoy, that people want to listen to or watch or buy some service, or you're out of business. And the more people that your radio show or television program can get to listen to a particular program, then the amount of dollars in profits skyrockets. So here's a hypothetical example, and I believe it's a fairly accurate one. All of the mainstream media in the United States and across the world. Now, this is critically important. And again, something that you will not hear in Christian colleges and universities and secular ones. Because it requires a minimal thinking outside the box. The fact of the matter is, there has been a radical transition going back maybe 20 years, 15 years, but then it exploded upon us during the Trump election. For the first time to this degree in media history, in the history of the media in the United States of America, newspapers, magazines, television programs, networks, films, etc., would deliberately be written, made, produced, hosted, actors speaking, but they would deliberately insult, belittle, attack, anger, reject, look down upon approximately 50% of their audiences. Now you say, Paul, how do you arrive at that statistic? Really simple. Most elections in the last 10 years or so, 15, 20 years or so, are so heavily polled and the strategies are so tight that you basically have close to a 50-50 support for your Republican presidential candidate or for your Democratic presidential candidate. And it's a variance of 50-50, but it's still in the range of 50-50. Okay? And so all elections are now won by the fact that, yes, the dedicated base has to come out and either Republican or Democrat, they have to vote and show up with their roughly 50% of the votes. But the elections are really won by that category of people that they call the undecided, because it's basically 50-50. So in order to win the election, you have got to have a message and a candidate that can sway the greatest numbers of undecided voters to either vote Democratic or Republican. And that's how all elections are won. So let's go back to the scenario. All these television programs, all these news programs, all these comedy shows, all the late night comedians without exception. Yeah, all of the late night comedians without exception. The vast majority of the shows during the day, the local newscasts, the network newscasts, the cable newswork netcasts. On cable news network, actually, in terms of mainstream media, television and cable news network television, and this network is not perfect, but at least I would say it makes the effort to be fair. I would not say, I think you would be very mistaken to say it's a conservative network, because it's not. I would say it's more accurate to say that it is a network which endeavors to be fair and balanced. And those are not just, ad words they use. So because they're the only network that makes a legitimate effort to be fair and balanced, conservatives think, wow, this is a conservative network, simply because you see a lot of conservative point of view. But you never see that point of view on all the other networks and all the other mainstream media. It's strictly the liberal progressive point of view. And conservatives are attacked viciously. So, with the exception of Fox News Network, which is a fair network, It's certainly not conservative. If it was conservative, it would be very moderately conservative. But because it's so unique in the fact that it tries to be fair, you hear a frequent conservative point of view. Now, guess what happens economically? You already know. Fox's ratings, the Fox News Network's ratings, the Fox News Network profits that they generate, Fox Business News Network, their ratings, the profits they generate are so far beyond all the other network television news shows and the cable news network shows. All of them together, I don't think, have the ratings that just a single Fox show has. Now, that doesn't mean every Fox show is a super success, but you have so many huge, successful shows on Fox simply because they're airing a conservative point of view. Because that's what the audience wants. And Fox, you see, is still running their network primarily on a business model. All right, so this is important to lay the groundwork here. Let's just name a bunch of businesses, okay? Let's talk about a restaurant business. Let's talk about a movie theater business. Let's talk about a car dealership. Let's talk about media, television, radio business, okay? Let's talk about a restaurant business. A restaurant business, you have to have a good product. That means the food, in order to be really successful, because so many restaurants close less than a year after they open. In fact, the success rate of restaurants is very minimal. The overwhelming majority of restaurants fail. But there are those restaurants that, they're still there 30, 40 years later. Why? Well, the number one thing of importance in making a profit is you have to have an excellent food product. In other words, your food has to taste great. It has to be fresh. It has to be pleasant to look at. The customer has to have the sense that there are the strictest hygiene rules in the kitchen. And if that food is delicious, bam, word of mouth, cash flow is going to come into that restaurant. Now, this is all also, it's not number one, but it's close to number one, and that is customer service. Are the waitresses or waiters friendly, polite, caring? Or are they just like, next, ma'am, have attitude, mess up your order, and make it a rude experience? Because you can have the greatest food product and content that would cause people to be lined up around the block to eat your food and make a fortune for the owners of the restaurant. But if the help, including the chef and the bus boys and the waiters and the waitresses, etc., have an attitude, are rude and incompetent, you are going to put the brakes big time on the success and the financial success of that restaurant. You cannot insult your customers. You can have the greatest food in the world, but if you insult your customers by rudeness, by messing up their orders, by having an attitude, by making them wait, if you annoy your customers, you're going to kill your business sooner or later, no matter how great the food is. So let's remember, in the dynamic of most businesses, it's not just having a great product. You also have to have great customer service. And man, I'll tell you, America, and corporate America especially, these guys who run these massive corporations, the problem is they live in an ethereal world like they're kings and queens. And They shouldn't be, because the great businessmen and the great businesswomen of previous generations, even if they were big shots, okay, they were hands-on. They rolled up their sleeves. They wanted to stay in touch with their business. They wanted to feel what their customers felt when their customers walked into one of their stores or car dealerships and stuff. So because they were in touch with their business, they demanded that their employees rise to the occasion and give outstanding customer service. Good customer service wasn't good enough. Better than average, okay customer service was not good enough. The restaurant entrepreneurs, the guys and the girls who made the big bucks and then franchised their restaurants, they demanded exceptional, outrageous, awesome customer service. And guess what? If you have a good food product and outstanding customer service, you are going to make a massive profit, a ton of money in the restaurant business. Now, you would think that that would be a no-brainer. But here in California, and it's probably the same where you live too, restaurants are opening and closing all the time. I have a rule. Maybe you have the same rule. It took me years. It took me decades. Probably, maybe you say, well, Paul, you're not too bright. That may be the truth, because it took me decades to figure this out. And my wife and I figured it out together, and it took us a long time. We're slow learners. We knew when we would try to go to a restaurant that, if it was packed out, that was a good sign. It means people liked the food. It was popular. And if you looked at the restaurant next door and it was empty, you knew that the food was probably iffy and the customer service was iffy. There's a reason why you have one restaurant just jammed with people who are smiling and happy, and the restaurant immediately next to it is completely empty. It's a ghost town. There's a reason. Well, we observe this so many times that the rule we have is that if we're in some place and we're looking for a restaurant and we have not heard of the reputation of a restaurant, and you can do the Yelp thing and the other social media thing, and it's better than nothing. But the truest test of a restaurant is, like during lunchtime or dinner time or whatever, the restaurant that is packed out, where people are standing in line to get in, it's jam-packed night after night, okay? That's the restaurant you want to eat in, because it means that it has a great reputation. Everybody wants to eat there because obviously the food has to taste great, and obviously the customer service has to be really good, or people wouldn't pack the place out. So whenever we go in a strange area and we're looking for a restaurant, first thing we look for is, well, what kind of restaurant do we want to go into, and then how crowded it is. And then we compare it. We may see a restaurant, two stores down, and it's kind of half filled. Well, why is it half filled when the other restaurant's packed? It means it's marginal. And then you see, it's just like it's amazing. You'll have on two long city blocks, you'll have one or two or three or maybe four restaurants that are jam-packed with people all the time. And then you'll have, in the same block, you'll have all these restaurants which just nobody's in there. Or maybe one person is there. It's empty. Well, I can tell you right now, you would be an idiot to go into the empty restaurant, because the fact that it's empty is telling you loud and clear the food's lousy, the prices are probably lousy, and the customer service is lousy. There's a reason why it's empty. And then when it comes to the half-filled one or the quarter-filled one, again, you're rolling the dice. Why is it only half full? Why is it only a quarter fill? It's because the food is not that great. The customer service is not that great. So the surest, most effective way of determining where's a good place to eat is if the restaurant is packed. Now, there are things that change that equation, like if they're giving away free booze or something that tilts the scale unfairly. But I have never made the wrong decision using that formula. Okay, that's a business model for a restaurant. Good food, treating your customers right, produces profit, money, and a successful restaurant. Car dealership. You can take any brand of car you want. Mercedes, Toyota, Honda, a GM truck, or whatever brand. The new Korean, the only reason I forget their names is they've changed their names a couple of times. Some of the new Korean cars. Okay, so you can go into any one of these car dealerships. Now, assuming they have the car models that you want, whether it's a truck or an SUV or a sedan or whatever it is, assuming they have a model that you like and that looks good and the price is decent. Let's make the assumptions that they all have cars that are hot at good deals. Okay, and you can go up and down a car dealership row where they have a whole bunch of car dealerships, and you can see time after time car dealerships that are packed, car dealerships that are empty. You can go, let's say, to two different Toyota dealerships, and one will be packed every day of the week, especially on the weekends, and one will be empty. Now, how could that be? They both have the same type of customers in terms of monetary money to buy cars, but why is one dealership empty? Customer service, high-pressure salesman, rude management, people don't like that. They won't go. People vote with their feet. So car dealerships, that if it's one place is consistently packed, it's because, the model has to be good, the car has to be good, the price has to be right. But I know many of you listening, like me, I've been to so many car dealerships. I've been to some really great car dealerships, and I reward them with my business because I've always had to buy a lot of cars, not because I'm indulgent, because I'm the guy who, my kids pay for their own cars, but I go in and negotiate the deal. And I've had to buy a lot of cars or lease a lot of cars because, for over 10 years, I commuted 180 miles a day. All right. Which means I burned out so many cars because you know how this works. You put on the excessive mileage that I was putting on cars. Okay. So if I didn't turn in a car and roll it over and lease something else or buy something else, and if I just let the mileage accumulate, I would put on any car, because of my commute, which was insane, but I was commuting to my nationally syndicated radio talk show, the Paul McGuire Show. I'd put 100,000 miles easily on any car that I commuted to work with within a year. So within a year, I'm at 100,000 miles. That's insane. But hey, God opened a dream job, and I did it. So what happened though is then I'd have to, when I traded in the car for either a lease or a purchase, you know what they do. They'll either charge you big bucks to pay for all your excess miles, and that's a lot of money, or you kind of con yourself and you roll the miles over into your next purchase. The problem with that is you keep rolling the mileage over, which I had to do. I had no choice. It wasn't bad stewardship. I simply had no choice. That mileage adds up, and then sooner or later you got to pay for it by buying or leasing a car where you're paying big bucks to to kind of cash out and get rid of the overage on miles. Okay, so all businesses, life insurance, whatever it is, you have to have a good product. You got to treat your customers right. Everybody knows that. Treat your customers right. And if you treat your customers right, they'll reward you with their business. Now, that's the essential business model for all businesses. So now we have the television, news, business, okay, sitcoms, episodic TV shows, comedy shows, news programs, cable news networks, et cetera, et cetera. And newspapers and magazines that are online and in print, okay? And like 97% of all the mainstream media, magazines, newspapers, radio, television, about 97%, all right, they're all, I'm talking about AOL News, I'm talking about Google News, all propaganda, fake news, by the way. All of this garbage. About 97% of them are militantly anti-Trump, militantly anti-conservative. So, and why? Because they're all owned by just 3 globalist corporations. And they're on the full-on attack mode to destroy Trump. Now, here is why now that they're not operating according to a normal business model. Something else is going on in a sneaky way. In a business model, no TV network, no television show or whatever would insult at least half their audience, 50%, night after night after night. Insult 50% of their audience by insulting President Trump, by insulting their conservative values, by attacking conservatives, by attacking Trump night after night after night, viciously. In fact, the comedy routines are secondary. It's really all about bad jokes which attack Trump. What this does, no matter whether it's radio, television, newspaper, social media, cable news network, what it does is that it angers 50% of your audience. And a good percentage of that 50% of your audience is going to stop watching, stop listening to, stop reading media which insults the audience, which insults the president that they voted for, which insults the conservative values they believe in. And so the reason that so many of these big comedian stars and television shows and cable news networks, etc., the reason that across the board so many of them have, comparatively speaking, lousy ratings, they don't have the audience share or the number of people watching or listening or reading that they should have. They're all way down, and most of them are losing money or close to losing money. You know why they're close to losing money? They're not operating in a business model. Their number one goal and agenda is to attack Trump, to insult and demean all the values that Trump stands for, and then to attack the Trump supporters. That means they are insulting and treating like dirt 50% of their potential audience. Okay? So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out why their ratings stink, why they're not profitable, and why they're struggling to have any audience. The reason they're not profitable, they're struggling to have any audience, and their shows are just like half of what they should be in terms of audience, is because they're continuing to do something which is anti-business. You can't insult your customers. You can't treat your customers like dirt I'm talking about Trump voters and conservatives. You can't insult your audience that way and expect your audience to stay with you and like you. The people are by the millions. 50% of their audiences, approximately, are turning those stupid channels, those magazines and newspapers and radio programs and AOL news. You know, I use AOL, okay? Do you think I have ever looked at the stupid AOL news banners? No, never do. When I go on Google news banners. Now that I go on Apple, it's some Apple news garbage. Whenever it's big tech news or mainstream media news, I don't even look at it. You know why I don't look at it? Because whenever I do, it's an anti-Trump article or attacking somebody in Trump's administration or attacking conservatives. Or it's always attacking the stuff I believe in. So why on earth do you think me or anybody else would bother to watch or view or read that service? So of course their ratings stink because they're violating the basic law of business. You cannot insult, anger, treat your customers like dirt and expect them to be loyal customers. It doesn't work that way. But you see, this is the great revealing here. The secret is they're not operating according to a business model. Now, up until the Trump election, most of them, to one degree or another, were operating according to a business model. What caused them to change from operating from a business model to be purely political and ideology driven? They're operating according to a political, ideological model, not a business model. Because if they cared about profits, they wouldn't cause 50% of their audience to walk. The late night comedians. I don't know if you remember this comedian, Johnny Carson. He was perhaps one of the most popular comedians there ever was. He was the king of late night television. His comedy show dominated the evening. He had, the audience he had was probably at least 100 million more than any of these other network shows, because back then there wasn't, cable and all the competition. But you know what? There were other great comedians in those time periods too back then. And they all had a rule. They all had strong political opinions. But all of these big time, super successful late night comedians operated on a business model. So the audience never really knew what their private, personal political views were, or whether they liked the president or whether they didn't like the president. And they did everything they could to make sure the audience didn't know their views, because they knew that if the audience knew what their political views were, they had the potential of losing half their audience. And so because they were in the entertainment business first, because they used a business model, they treated their customers or their viewers or watchers or readers with respect. And therefore, they wouldn't do political stuff because they didn't want to drive away their audience. And thus, they were financially, they were money-making machines because they operated on a business model. So how is it possible that all this media is pumping out propaganda, causing 50% of their audience or readers or viewers or watchers to walk? They're all falling apart. The New York Times is, hemorrhaging. It's basically in bankruptcy all the time. Same with the Washington Post, and same with a lot of other media. The only reason the New York Times and the Washington Post and all these other networks and stuff are still actually broadcasting or printing is because they've all been secretly bailed out through various sources. Because if they weren't bailed out, they would go Chapter 11. They declare bankruptcy. That's how many viewers and readers and watchers they're losing, because they're not operating in accordance with a business model. Now, so who is it that's bailing these people out? Because you see, when you bail them out, they're free from having to operate on a business model. So somebody or a group of somebody's very, very powerful is subsidizing them, is floating them money, is giving them money through fund companies, and they're giving them hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars so that they can continue to be ideologically and politically driven, attacking Trump voters, even though they've lost half their audience and people don't even want to advertise on their networks. They continue on because they're being secretly subsidized. And I'll leave it up to you to figure out who do you think it is that's secretly subsidizing them. So this is important to understand, because we've never been in a time and a place where media and newspapers and stuff have rejected the business model. It's all about propaganda. All right, now let's get into phase 2 of the program. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report, by the way. And if you visit paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, we have all kinds of things for you to watch, read, articles. The entire archives of the Paul McGuire Report are free for you to listen to. We have all the television prophecy news reports on video. We have the Paradise Mountain Church services on video for you to watch, and an announcement of the conferences I'm speaking at, and an announcement of the next Paradise Mountain Church service, which is coming up soon. Okay, so now let's move into phase 2. Here we are in the greatest battle for the hearts and souls of mankind in the history of the world. And we have a Trojan horse, and you all know what Trojan horses are. This is during the time of Rome and before, when enemy troops would build a great statue or a massive statue of a horse on wheels, and they would roll it in as a gift through the front door, not through the front door, through the gates into somebody's kingdom. And once that giant horse statue, they were huge, moved into the inner walls of this fortress, it turned out, it would have 50 soldiers hidden inside the hollow framework of the horse, the Trojan horse or whatever. And then they would attack the empire from within and destroy it. So the Trojan horse was a means of smuggling your armed troops into a fortified city, and you thought you were getting this nice gift, but in reality you were getting a hollow gift packed with armed warriors that would destroy you. And this technique was used with other things besides horses, but it's called a Trojan horse. So, right now we're in the greatest battle for the hearts and souls of mankind in the history of the world. And there are so many factors that are lined up that make our time period unique. You can't dismiss what I said by saying, well, this has happened before, because if you study the facts, it has not happened before. There has never been a time in history when you have all these singular, dangerous events attacking our society, our nation, or our people. But even though they're all singular events, there's such a large number of them that when they all come together, it constitutes a massive attack on our nation. We've never experienced that. And then due to technology, and I'm talking about mass surveillance technology, all technology that is tracking you, profiling you, monitoring you, and to some degree controlling you. This science fiction-like mass surveillance technology has never existed before. When you go back into history and you read about the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler, they put together a very highly organized, very highly managed, and highly controlled dictatorship. They knew who everybody was, what their background was, what their beliefs were. They knew who they were going to send to the concentration camps and kill, who would live. How were they able to keep such a precise account of millions and millions of people in Nazi Germany? That was one of the reasons their dictatorship was so effective. The reason was that this is what their technology was. And this was in the 30s, the 1930s. Their technology was old shoeboxes with stacks of index cards in them, where the Nazi soldiers would handwrite notes, the name of somebody, the age, the weight, all important information to the Nazi state in terms of control, whether they were an enemy, what their political beliefs were, what their ethnic background was. So the Germans had a meticulous and comprehensive filing system, which they could keep control of the people, but it was all built on old shoeboxes packed with index cards that were filled out in pen and pencil. And so even though the Nazis were very sophisticated in many other ways, this is how they kept track organizationally of millions of people, shoeboxes and index cards. And yet they were deadly efficient. People just didn't disappear. They were tracking everybody. Now, here we are, a long time, 75 years or more from the time of Nazi Germany. And in the process, we have highly powerful, sophisticated computers that have now become miniaturized. So the average laptop, or even a cell phone computer, or an iPad or whatever, can do what these, I don't know if you've seen pictures of these old computers, but if you looked at like our defense industry and our computer systems in the 50s, each computer was the size of a home refrigerator or far larger. So every computer was the size, at least, of a big home refrigerator. And you'd have to walk into a room and you could easily see 50 to 100 of these full-size refrigerator-sized computers with these giant, like, reel-to-reel, recording things, these giant wheels and tapes spinning. And so an ordinary laptop computer today can do more work, process more information in a far better way and in a far faster way. An ordinary laptop can do what it used to take a giant super air-conditioned room with 100 refrigerator-sized individual computers linked up together to do. So think about how far we've come since the 50s. The room had to be super cold because back then, if computers overheated, they would completely malfunction. And that was considered a big breakthrough. Okay, so technology increases. We now have cell phones, we have laptops, and they're all miniaturized. Their memory, their capacity to conduct all kinds of storage of information, retrieval, analysis is just endless. Then you add to that the cloud systems, and you add to that wireless technology, and you add to that what you can do with cell phones, and the technology which includes GPS on cell phones, but you realize you have GPS in your laptop. You're being tracked with your laptop just like you're being tracked. Anything you have which has a computer in it has GPS. So when you're running around with your laptop, you're being tracked just as meticulously as if you're using your cell phone. And the cell phone tracks everywhere you go all the time. Not to mention the computers that are in many cars, which also have GPS. So the GPS is a cell phone, but it's also a personal tracking device on you. It tracks everywhere you go, every second of the day, and it sends pictures and addresses. So anybody who needs to knows where you have been, what time you were there. They can see pictures of where you were and the exact address. And you're carrying your own tracking system. So you're under mass surveillance. And if you have a laptop, that's an additional mass surveillance. And we all use so many computers and other similar devices. A lot of you have these special electronic cameras or these special electronic wristwatches, which do all kinds of things. But don't forget, they also have GPS. And so they track you wherever you're going. Now, this technology to track people has a good side. It gives you all kinds of options and choices, and it can help you drive and not get lost and plan stuff. And there's a lot of massive benefits to computerized technology, all right? But never forget, all computerized electronic technology is first, I'm going to say this, but I want you to pay special attention to how I'm saying it. Because how I'm saying it is I'm going to give you the priority of what's happening and the main reason why something's happening. And then I'm going to give you the secondary reason why things are happening. It's a surprise to most Americans and people around the world. It's a total surprise. And many of them can't believe it when they hear it. But the primary purpose of cell phones, laptops, iPods, computerized wristwatches, and all computerized systems, okay, in the house, like the little robots that will make phone calls for you and do all kinds of things. The primary purpose of all this computerized internet technology, the primary purpose is it is a surveillance mechanism on you. That includes what you watch on cable, the TV shows and stuff. Its primary purpose is to be a spying device on you, and its primary purpose is to be a mass surveillance device. Don't ever be naive. Don't even be tempted to be so naive and so stupid, like so many of, I'm not trying to be unkind, I'm just telling you like it is, like so many naive evangelicals are. Do not even be tempted to be that stupid. Because anybody who knows anything in the tech business and in the intelligence business knows that what I'm saying is a fact. So don't be tempted to say, oh, I don't believe that. If you're going to be tempted to say, I don't believe that, then I can't help you, and neither can anybody else, because you're not even basing that on facts. The primary purpose of all these technological computer cell phone things, flat screen TVs, even though I talk about this all the time, people still don't get it. Every time you have a big flat screen TV, like it's a big one for the living room or the bedroom or whatever, or even you have a flat screen on your laptop, it should be common. I mean, I've said this a million times, and you would think everybody would know it, but most people don't. You are being spied on visually and through sound Okay? You are being listened to, and you are being photographed, and you are being videotaped 24/7 from just about any room in your house, especially if you have alarm systems which have like the Ring thing, which is a camera outside, and if you have cameras in the house for surveillance, then every room that you're in, you're photographed. Every room that has a cell phone, a laptop, or a computer, never forget they are always recording your audio and always videotaping you, whether or not the power is on. Get it through your head. The power switch is an idiot switch, okay? These technological devices are going to record you in video and record your audio, and they do not need to have the power switch on. Those power switches are somewhat fake. Yeah, it'll turn your TV or whatever, or laptop on or off. But the reality is it doesn't turn off the camera and the microphone. So the primary purpose of all this is mass surveillance. Never forget it. Mass surveillance is a fancy word for being spied on. What is the purpose of mass surveillance? Control, power. In addition to mass surveillance, and the Nazis didn't have this, the computer, the cell phone, the flat screens, and all the other technologies are a profiling technology. Okay? That means you're being spied on, and then these technological devices like cell phones and flat screens and laptops, etc., everything they're hearing, everything they're watching, whether the power is on or off, they are storing in massive computers with your name, and then they are categorizing everything they hear you say and everything they watch. They're categorizing. They're profiling you in 100 different ways. They're profiling you to sell products, goods, and services to you. That's why you'll sit in front of the TV if you really pay attention. And the newer the TVs and stuff you have, the more efficiently they do this. But you can be sitting there next to your cell phone, or even if your cell phone's off, you can be sitting there next to your flat screen television, and you can be talking about, gee, maybe I should get a baseball hat, and you name your favorite team. And then all of a sudden, you get a Facebook notice or an ad pops up on your cell phone and laptop relatively shortly afterwards with somebody selling baseball hats in different sizes from your favorite team. Happens all the time. And if it isn't happening to you, it's because whatever technology you have it's a couple of years older. But all the new stuff, it's fully up to date. Okay? So, master computers, like those gigantic computer warehouses in Utah, you've seen the NSA computer systems. These giant black buildings are gigantic computer memory storage facilities, and they will categorize you and profile you. Like, are you a Republican, conservative, liberal, Democrat, radical, environmentalist? Do you believe in climate change? What do you believe about sexuality? Are you a Christian? Do you believe in moral values? Are you an atheist? And you can go down. They know so much. They know everything they need to know about you. And then, after they profile you, they are classifying you and categorizing you for the future. Now, if I have to explain to you what that means, then I suggest you read my books and start turning on your brain, because I shouldn't have to explain the sentence that comes after that. It's self-evident. It's self-evident. you don't have a massive surveillance system that uses satellite technology, that uses wireless. And by the way, the new 5G technology, and by the way, I talk about all of this up to the second in my brand new book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Souls of Mankind in the History of the World. And you can pre-order that book right now, and you should. And when you pre-order it, it means you're going to get your copy before it's printed and released to the general public. Your copy will be rushed to you before it's released to the general public. You will get a financial discount off the book, and you will get a signed autographed copy. I think that's a really good deal. And you should order it now by going to paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. McGuire is spelled MCGUIRE, paulmcguire.us. And you can pre-order it now. And if you pre-order it right now, you will get your copy mailed to you before it's released to the general public. You'll get a financial discount off the price of the book, and you'll get an autographed copy. And you need to get extra copies for friends and Bible studies. I consider this perhaps the most important book I've ever written. And if you've been listening to me talk, there's reasons for that. And the primary reason is I am absolutely convinced after over 40 plus years of research that the time period we're in is totally unique in human history, and it's absolutely unique in the history of America because of the technology that I just described to you. If our nation is to do a radical shift in any direction, if it went into a super right-wing state or it goes into a super socialist state, I mean, you listen to some of these candidates, you ought to be terrified. You ought to be terrified. If you know anything about what happened in communist China, communist Russia, communist Cuba, 200 and the other communist nations, where collectively 240 million people were killed, shot, starved to death, sent to concentration camps. It was a bloodbath. Okay? They lost all their freedoms. They lived under a cruel police state dictatorship where they were tortured, the women were raped. Okay? They didn't get a worker's paradise. They were starving to death, working at slave labor wages. All of the freedoms were taken away. All this baloney about how the state is going to provide social justice. You know what? I'm just going to say it like it is because I've had it with this. I've really had it with this, so I'm going to say it like it is. I have been, many of you know that I used to be constantly on the biggest TV programs on the Fox News Network, the Fox Business Channel, and CNN for over 10 years. I was on constantly, mainly on Fox, the biggest shows. And I was the conservative radio talk show host, which would debate the liberals in the media, or a liberal talk show host. And I'm not bragging, but I won every single debate, and I was on constantly for 10 years. And you know why I won every single debate? Because I didn't take it for granted. I thought of myself like Avis, your number two. They all had big established names. So while they were cruising on their previous successes, I was studying the notes, studying the statistics, studying the facts, so that when I debated them on the air on Fox, I could rattle off like a machine gun data, statistics to back up what I was trying to prove, and I'd win the arguments. And I took no prisoners. And this is why they constantly wanted me on. I had a massive share of audience. That is not how any of the cable news networks operate anymore. They want very timid, they definitely don't want high-powered media guests. I was always respectful to the host, always, but they don't want a lot of their hosts right now they're not the brightest bulbs on the tree. So they don't want somebody who's going to show up there propped up, hotshot. And they don't want somebody to get up there and give out real truth. They want to manage the truth, even Fox. Okay, so the point is that we're in the greatest battle for the hearts and souls of mankind in the history of the world. And why this time is different than any other time is because of all the technology I explained. I explained to you the surveillance and profiling nature of it, and the fact that the media, 97% of the media, is politically propaganda ideologically driven, which means they're not operating under a business model. Well, what does that mean? It means essentially they're the voice of the deep state. They're Big Brother. Their job now, and they don't even hide it, is to brainwash the masses, indoctrinate the masses to the official politically correct viewpoint. The job of all of the media, film, television, music, the only exceptions are alternative media, which, if you notice, they keep censoring more and more and more. Big tech, search engines, social media keep censoring and pushing high-powered, truthful alternative media farther and farther and farther away into the deep, dark crevices of the internet. I mean, you really got to pay attention because your life and my life depends upon truthful, free information being released to the American public. Without truth, without our ability to hold our corrupt politicians accountable, we have nothing. And so whether you speak the truth about big pharma, whether you speak the truth about genetically modified organisms in the food, if you speak the truth about what's really causing diseases, you speak the truth about economics, you speak the truth about corruption, you speak the truth about globalism, you speak the truth about Christianity, the Bible, salvation, you are going to be driven further and further into the remote corners of the internet. They will rig your numbers, they will strip you from the search engines, and they will make you electronically disappear. This is not something that I'm speculating on. This is something that I know for a fact because I have been observing what has been happening to friends of mine and friends of yours who do alternative media. I've watched their numbers be rigged. These people still have massive, massive radio, podcasting, television audiences on the internet, alternative media. They have massive audiences, but the big tech and the big brother companies are so threatened by them that they actually rig their numbers. And the reason, again, that they rig their numbers is because by showing, by distorting how many viewers and watchers and readers and listeners they really have, they destroy the advertising dollars that come in to these individuals and groups so they can continue broadcasting and publishing. Because the social media advertisers work through agencies, and they want to know how many watchers, how many viewers, etc. you have, and the amount of money they'll pay for ads on your show is determined by your numbers. So the Orwellian thought police go in there and they rig the numbers, which mean I could name to you, and I'm not going to do this, many people you know who have very successful online presences, and their numbers have been rigged so that it looks like they have 75% less viewers or watchers or readers all over the place. And I know these people, so I talked to them on the phone, and I said, well, how has this impacted you? They said, we used to bring in X amount of money every month, which would pay for some staffing, which would pay for the production, and now we're barely subsisting on some small amount of money. And it's not because they've lost audience because they were incompetent. It's because their audience was stolen from them by making it electronically disappear. You see what the game plan here is? They don't want, especially with this election coming, they don't want truth out there. They don't want it out there. We're in a war, folks, spiritual war. Our founding fathers gave us freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and many other freedoms. Those freedoms, just like the rigging of the internet, have been illegally stolen from us. And the way they steal it from us is that they don't always come out and attack your right to free speech. That would be too obvious. So what they do is they don't. That's not their approach. What they do is they rip you off all social media and accuse you of hate speech. And that's just a clever way of getting around your free speech. And so what is the hate speech they're accusing you of? It could be something like, you don't believe in climate change, therefore you're hateful, and your views are going to produce, in their eyes, mass deaths. So we're going to kick you off all of our technology and internet and social media and videos because you talked badly about climate change, and we considered that hate speech. See how evil and distorted that is? And it goes on and on and on. This is a war. This is a war for the heart and soul. Look, make no mistake about it of where we are in time. Please, wake up. I know you that are regular listeners of the Paul McGuire Report are awake, or you wouldn't even be listening. Our responsibility. We all have a circle of influence. Some of us have larger circles of influence. But we all need to be faithful with whatever circle of influence we have, and we all have a circle of influence. And we need to start to awaken our brothers and sisters in Christ and awaken other people to what's really happening. That means we're going to have to know what we're talking about. We're going to have to be effective in our communication, because we're not going to persuade people if we're going to be a bunch of ignorant bozos. We have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Because if we lose this battle for ideas that's raging in people's heads, we're going to go into a totalitarian state. I'm going to lay it out on today's program, probably far more bluntly than I normally do. I know with everything in me, through over 40 years of intensive research, that if we were to take the different scenarios I am talking about and reduce them into a mathematical formula of probability, I can tell you right now, and so can many other analysts, secular, Christian, and so on, people who think, I can tell you right now that America is heading with lightning speed. It's heading into becoming a totalitarian state, a socialist, Marxist totalitarian state that will be run by an all-powerful state and not the people, where your wealth will be radically redistributed, which means if you're middle class, you'll be like in a third world nation, where you won't be able to afford a home because they want you, because they're trying to save the planet environmentally. And if you believe that, I don't know what to tell you. They're going to force you to live in apartments in the inner city, ride bicycles, no cars, and the con job is you're doing it to save the planet from a catastrophe. I hate to break it to you, but there is no catastrophe. This is just a pretense to slam dunk socialist totalitarian regime. That's what this is all about. The people who own the media are the globalist international banking family elite. And, I'm trying to cram the entire book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Souls of Mankind in the History of the World, into a couple of sentences. I can't do it. That's why you need to read the book. I'm not telling you that because I want you to buy a book. Well, that's not true. I do want you to buy the book, but my motive isn't financial. If my motive was financial, I would write some drippy Christian book methodically and with a calculating mind, and I would write myself a mega bestseller, but it would be all fake, phony, cotton candy inspiration that has no real value in the challenges of life. And I can't sell my soul, I'm sorry. So let me just lay it out to you. 2020 is a critical election. If we lose 2020, guess what? They're coming after you. They're coming after me. They will take down all free voices from all media. Everything that they don't agree with will become hate speech. They will wage war on the middle class and the working class. And they will create an economic collapse because Marxism doesn't work. You start forcing wealth redistribution, the whole system will crash. How do I know that? For the same reason you know that. We're not dummies like a lot of the people we interact with. We know, we've seen the pictures, we've seen the videos, we've heard the accounts of what has happened to every single nation that has gone socialist, communist, and Marxist. The same results happen 100% of the time. There's no deviation. And that is, people lose all their rights and freedoms. Millions are sent to re-education or concentration camps. The economy collapses. The military rule the streets in brutal dictatorial style. Mass shootings, mass executions. When I say mass, I'm talking about killing millions and millions of people with brute force. The state, which has promised all the suckers out there that they're going to have social justice, you idiot. You think a Marxist dictatorship is going to give you social justice? How stupid are you? For crying out loud, the idiocy level in America is epidemic. We have millions of people of all races and ethnic groups who are so brain dead and know nothing of history, and yet in their delusion they think that they know everything about everything. They're empty-headed fools. The only thing they know is the cement that's poured into their heads through the late-night comedians and the movie stars who know less than anybody, and are telling them through this groupthink how wonderful this will all be. You idiot! I mean, and by the way, if you got a problem with me saying you idiot, here's my rebuttal to your dishonest accusation of my passion based on my love for your children, my children, and for my love for my neighbor as myself. Here is my response to you that's duly justified. My response to you is this. Every communist leader, the big ones, Stalin in Russia, Lenin in Russia, Chairman Mao in communist China, these were the big ones. Karl Marx, the guy who authored the Communist Manifesto. They all said openly and plainly in writing, for anybody who can read, if people will read. I quote this in my book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Souls of Mankind in the History of the World. They came out and said, so that any idiot can understand it. Listen to me very carefully. You know this, most of you. Lenin, the great communist leader, let's just say famous communist leader, He called all the naive people in America, the intellectuals, the artists, the people that were poor, the middle class, he called all the people that believed in communism and socialism. Do you know what his words were? He called them the useful idiots. He called them the useful idiots. And that, if he was alive today, he would call all these late night comedians, all these people marching in the streets, and all these Christian pastors who are blabbing about social justice and wealth redistribution, which is socialism. Lenin, the communist leader, would have called them useful idiots. You know why? Because what he was saying with the remark, "you're useful idiots," is that you're an idiot because you don't get the obvious, blaring in your face reality that socialism and communism is not a good thing. It's a monster that destroys civilizations. So you're an idiot for not recognizing the obvious. But we need you to be an idiot because we need you to rally behind us and bring in a socialist revolution so that we can take over. So you are useful to us, and your stupidity and idiocy is useful to us. Because if you actually had a brain and used it, you would see that what you're doing is destroying your own nation, your own life, and your own culture, and your own family. So you're useful to us, and we need you to stay being an idiot. And then these communist leaders explained openly, all these idiots, professors, media, talking as if there's a difference between communism, Marxism, socialism. You fool! You raving, imbecilic, one-celled brain. I think, doesn't a cucumber have more than one brain cell? I mean, at least it can reach towards the sun when it's growing. You idiot! You think that communism and socialism and Marxism are different things? They're all the same thing. If you would bother to read a book instead of being glued to some idiotic, I don't know what you're watching. If you bothered to read a book, all the communist leaders explained it. It's a trickery system. It's a deception system. Socialism is the soft sell. But the communist leaders themselves, like Lenin said, all socialism is the first step. It's a seductive step to get you into our communist Marxist dictatorship. It's like bait on a hook for a fisherman. And all the fools and suckers in America, especially in politics, the stupidity of the people running for political office is radioactively dangerous. They're filled with zeal, they're filled with anger, and they are absolutely morons. They know nothing of history, because the very things that they say are going to fix America, every single one of those things have been tried and implemented by all the socialist, communist, Marxist regimes in history. And the result was always the same 100% of the time. There is not one single solitary exception to the outcome of their plans, which are socialist plans. Socialism, Marxism, and communism have never, ever produced a free, prosperous nation, ever. All these Marxist professors indoctrinating your children, they hide as tenured professors. They won't debate people like me because I would massacre them in a debate. They would leave the podium bleeding and naked in embarrassment because I would tear to shreds the flimsy lies and deceit that they hide behind. The screaming reality is this, that there has never been in the history of the world a communist, socialist, Marxist state which has ever produced prosperity, happiness, freedom, social justice, fair redistribution of wealth, and freedom for anybody, anywhere. In fact, every single communist, Marxist, socialist state, without exception, produces 180 degrees, the exact opposite of what they promise. All of these socialist, communist, Marxist states produce a bloody dictatorship. They kill millions and millions of people. The economy crashes. The nation is bankrupt. The people that they said they're going to have great jobs are working at slave labor wages. They can't afford to live in a home. They have to share a crowded apartment. They starve to death. They have no freedoms whatsoever, no freedom of speech. They have nothing except a gun pointed to their head, in which they're told to work harder and harder. And then they mass massacre millions of people. On top of that, they don't fairly redistribute the wealth. There's not one communist socialist nation that has ever equally redistributed the wealth. You simply have a giant slave class that are in poverty, and then you have this very, very upper elite communist socialist leadership class, which is worth millions and millions of dollars. They live like kings and queens. It never pans out any other way but that. I mean, for crying out loud, open your eyes to the communist nations today. Check out Cuba, workers' paradise, huh? It's a hellhole. Communist China, big, powerful nation. Communist China may have big, powerful economy, big, powerful war machine. It may have a lot of things. But you know what? In the things that really matter, Communist China is the poorest nation on earth. If you define wealth and prosperity as having a giant military, a giant economy, massive production lines, giant skyscrapers, if that's your definition of wealth and affluence, well, then yeah, Communist China has got it all. But you'd have to be an idiot to come up with that conclusion. Communist China enslaves its people. It doesn't have to, because its military and economy is powerful. But it monitors every single citizen through mass surveillance and cameras on them 24/7. And then when you see it's called the Communist Chinese Social Credit System. And whenever you see a person, you'll see numbers going up and down on the screen whenever you look at an individual. Those numbers reflect their scoring and their ranking, whether it's going up numerically or down numerically on the communist social credit score. And if they do things that do not please the Communist Party, like even jaywalking, or saying God bless you when somebody sneezes, or anything remotely Christian, they go down in their social credit score. And this is the most brutal way of controlling people's lives. The people in China, the Christians in China, complained they would rather be sent to a prison or concentration camp than be under the rule of a social credit system. Because if they bring down your social credit system because, you got caught sneaking, reading a passage of the Bible or whatever, you can't get hired. You can't feed your family. You can't rent an apartment. You're out on the street with the dogs begging for food. Why does Communist China, perhaps the most powerful nation on earth, have to resort to this brutal, totalitarian, computerized surveillance state? You know why? Because that's the nature of communism. Communism is based on a lie. Communism is an antichrist system. Let's quickly review the goals of every communist, socialist, Marxist revolution. It's always the same. Number one, destroy Christianity. Number two, destroy marriage. Number three, destroy absolute right, absolute wrong, and destroy traditional morality. Number 4, destroy patriotism. Those are all Christian things. Why are they hell-bent on destroying everything Christian, everything decent, everything good? You know why? Because the essence of a communist, socialist, Marxist system is that the state is God. That makes it an antichrist system. When they say social justice, you fool, there is no social justice in a communist, Marxist, socialist system. Do some reading of history. It doesn't exist. The only social justice that occurs is in Christian nations like America. And you can bellyache all you want. America did commit a horrible sin by capturing slaves from Africa and enslaving them as slaves. That was horrible. But guess what? America also spilled its blood and had a civil war to free the slaves. That doesn't happen in communist nations. You better wake up. If you live in the delusion that it can't happen here, then you are just as foolish as the Jews before they learned their lesson. Because remember, even when the Jews were hearing accurate reports of the mass concentration camp deaths in the Holocaust, they refused to believe it. They kept saying over and over again, like Christians in America who say it can't happen here, the Jews were saying it can't happen here, it can't happen here. Well, guess what? When somebody turned on the lights in the darkness, the Jews woke up. They were shocked to discover it was happening there. And all their denial of it can't happen there was exposed for the lie that it was. But the Jews learned their lesson after Hitler in World War II. The Jews no longer say it can't happen here. You know what they say now? Never again. Never again. The Jews are on the job. They will not allow themselves to be enslaved and conquered and put into some kind of dictatorship. That's why they say never again. Now, when you listen to Christians talk, Christian ministers, Christian pastors, ordinary Christians, Christian seminaries, Christians in big ministries, what do you hear from their lips? What do you hear from their lips? Do you hear never again? Do you hear, I'm going to obey Jesus Christ's commandment to occupy the land until he comes? Is that what you hear? I don't hear that. I don't hear that hardly at all. You know what I hear? I hear, it can't happen here. It can't happen here. It can't happen here. And that's exactly the wording that will bring you into a concentration camp and a re-education camp. And if you think that I'm not passionate and on fire about this message, I work till 2 and 3 in the morning every day of the week, finishing up this book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Souls of Mankind in the History of the World, for one reason, because I see the handwriting on the wall, and I recognize that if I don't do everything I can, and if I am not as strategic and as effective as I can to wake up my brothers and sisters, I'm a watchman, and I am not going to be some lazy, reprobate watchman who sees the enemy coming in the distance and does nothing. I am, right now, right in front of your face, I am blowing the trumpet. And those of you that have the Spirit of God and you know I'm blowing the trumpet, I am blowing this trumpet so loud my own ears are splitting. And this book will blow the trumpet so loud it's going to wake up a lot of people who are in a comatose condition, and they need to be woken up. And if the book and the blowing of the trump doesn't wake them up, I'm going to take a bucket of ice cold water and I'm going to dump it on the heads of a lot of these pastors' faces when they sleep at night. No, I'm dead serious, because I've had it. I'm not going to sit here passively and watch our nation transform into something under the Third Reich. No, it's not going to happen under my watch. I'm a faithful watchman. I didn't say I'm a perfect watchman. I said I'm a faithful watchman. You need to get the book, The Greatest Battle for the Hearts and Souls of Mankind in the History of the World. You need to get that book. And you can get it at paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. And if you pre-order the book now at paulmcguire.us, you get your copy mailed to you before it's released to the general public. You get a financial discount on the book, and you get an autographed copy. But the most important thing is you get all this information that you can help disseminate, and it will help equip you win the battle that we're all in. We're all in this together, by the way. And then finally, remember the words of Jesus Christ, occupy until I come. I cannot do this alone. I can simply do what God has called me to do. And maybe you can do a better job. Maybe you know somebody who can do a better job. But guess what? When God calls them, they're not available. And there's nothing special about me. It's just that when God called, I said, yes, here I am, Lord. That's all I did. That's my only virtue, and I'm not even sure that came from me. I think that was done by the grace of God. Together, we can turn this thing around. But I'm going to need your help. Because guess what? If you really understand the gravity of the situation, you would be all in, just like I'm all in. I need to have prayer warriors who pray with fervency and spiritual warfare regarding what I've been talking about, praying for me, my family, and this ministry. We are on the front lines, and we're fighting principalities and powers. I praise God for every one of you that are obedient to the power of the Holy Spirit calling you to pray. And to others, I exhort you to become prayer warriors for me in this ministry. I thank God for those of you who know that the internet is rigged, and you're doing everything you can to send links of this message to people, your friends, with your recommendation. Spread this message far and wide. Send links of it to people. And then finally, this is a real war. It's a spiritual war. The enemy has trillions and billions. I don't need trillions and billions. God has given me an imagination and creativity which multiplies wealth. But I do need significant cash flow, significant financial resources to win this winnable war. And so I'm asking you, if you share this burden for America, if you share this burden that I have, I'm asking you to really soberly go before the Lord Jesus Christ and ask God this. Ask God, Lord, what do you want me to do with my money? Where do you want me to plant my money as a seed? Which ministry, Lord, is doing what you called God's people to do? And if you believe that we are doing precisely what God wants done, then I need you to ask God, just like a little child, just say, Lord Jesus, how much do you want me to contribute? How much do you want me to financially donate to Paul McGuire Ministries and Paradise Mountain Church? And no matter how large the amount is, whether it's $200,000 or $50,000 or $5, whatever it is, whatever God tells you to do, obey Him, no matter how much out of the box it is. Because if we have people faithfully obeying the Lord, then small amounts given regularly by lots of people add up, and large amounts enable us to take the giant steps that we need to take to occupy the land. But simply go to the Lord and ask Him, God, what do you want me to do? And then whatever He tells you to do, do. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. I think you can tell how strongly I feel about this. And really, if you think I feel this strongly, I held it back. I held a lot back because the intensity of my commitment to winning this spiritual war is beyond anything you can possibly know. But I can't do it alone. I need partners. Together, we can take the land, and we will. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.